This is a Fox 11 Morning News.
Sadly, it's a topic we seem to be talking about a lot more these days, from the Sandusky case to the LAUSD problems. Child sex abuse has been in the news a lot. Now, joining us is Stacey Honowitz. If you have a TV, you know Stacey Honowitz. She also is the supervisor of the Child Abuse Unit of the Florida State's Attorney Office. You've been doing this for 2-3 decades, I think, right?
Yes, a very long time.
This is what your life has been devoted to. The first question is, we're reporting more of this. Is there more of it, or because of technology and people now reporting things, is that what makes a difference?
Yeah, it's really what you just said. I mean, with technology, and people aren't afraid to come forward. Now people see it in the news. It's been going on for ages. People never reported it. It was really in the shadows. It's taboo. It's a taboo subject that nobody ever wants to discuss.
Well, it's horrible because it ruins children mentally for the rest of their lives. But my question about, we were talking earlier about priests. It's not just priesthood. They seem to be protected, not as much now, but they certainly were shuffled around a lot. And then the statute of limitations, how wrong is that?
Well, that's very interesting. I know you were talking about it this morning. A lot of states now have changed the statute of limitations to say there isn't going to be one now because of all these children that were abused and victims. They come forward later and nothing can ever be done. In Florida, we've changed it because of that reason. Kids were committing suicide because later on they'd go to court and say,
I can't. To what?
That it does not exist. It does not exist.
In Florida,
in Florida, under a certain age. In other words, if you were abused or molested under the age of 12 and you came forward at 40, whatever, you could never get prosecuted.
It's so rare that a child of 10 will come forward because they're so scared. They're either threatened.
But
if you tell anybody, there's a million
also
reasons.
In the way of that, because you were around for this, in the 90s, the issue of recovered memory was a big deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of the recovered memory was false. So that made legislatures run the other direction after overreacting to begin with. Where is that now?
Well, people always say anybody can walk into a doctor's office now and say, oh, I'm going through so many hassles and I'm having so many issues. Maybe I was abused at the time. So you have to be very careful in court.
Yes.
Listen, not every case that comes into the state attorney's office do we prosecute. There are situations where even in a big divorce, one parent will say to the child, hey, say that dad was touching you, or say that mom. It does go on, so I can't sit up here and tell you that every case comes to fruition.
But as a person who has, survived molestation, you remember. I mean, I know a lot of people do block out.
Yes.
And that is a way of preserving yourself, self-preservation, right? Kids can block things out and remember later.
And then what happens is they do go to the doctors and they go to the psychiatrist and they figure out, you know what, I have been blocking and this is going on. I'm having so many problems in my life later on in relationships and doing things, and this is the reason why. I've prosecuted cases where men were little boys at the time and now they can't change their own kid's diaper because of what happened to them. I mean, it really is a lasting effect.
And Stacey, there's also this aspect of it. There's nothing more wonderful than adults who love children and people who are camp counselors and coaches. They're the best people in the world, but they're also in a position where they could be the worst people in the world.
Absolutely.
And it's so difficult. Everybody's untrusting now about everybody.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the world we live in. I mean, really, that's why I wrote these books, because so many kids were afraid to tell. And you're right, there are great camp counselors. There's also really bad camp counselors because pedophiles want to be around children.
Right. You get the best people and the worst people.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really their MO.
These books are great. You know, I have a daughter who's 5, and I always tell her, because that's the age it started for me, 5 and 6, and so I tell her, I'm very open about it, but not everybody can be that open.
No, I wrote the books because so many people were coming into my office. I would say to the little kids, do you know about your privates? Did anyone? No, nobody ever told me.
You said it's taboo. It is less taboo now than it's ever been to talk about.
No, Steve, it still is. It really is. That's why I wrote them, because my caseload is incredible.
You think it's less taboo, Steve, because you're reporting on it more, but for the child who's 10, it's still extremely scary.
For a discussion on the air, for instance, you very rarely had this 15 years ago.
I agree.
You have it all the time, so it's disseminated out there now.
Yeah, but you wouldn't believe the resistance I still get. Even with Sandusky, with all the high-profile cases, people still don't want to talk about sex crimes.
Speaking of the Sandusky case, one aspect of it is the role of Joe Paterno, the famed and formerly beloved, most beloved person in the state. And the selective email distribution, I don't know if it tells the whole picture, basically said that the vice president said in his email, I talked to Joe, and Joe said, no, let's do the compassionate thing and have Sandusky leave campus, maybe get him some counseling, whatever. For Joe Paterno, from his generation, remember he was 70, 80 years old, that was the way they went, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's how you have...
Don't tell about Uncle so-and-so.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I still think it's disgraceful.
It is disgraceful, but you are right. That is the way that they
and
probably
what about
looked at
Mike McCreary? This guy walked in, saw some slamming or whatever he said he heard, and didn't physically rip him off a boy. I have an issue with that guy.
Well, of course, but you can't blame him for not going and assaulting somebody and trying to do something. You can't put the blame on him.
Why didn't he call 911?
I don't know. That's something you have to ask him. But people are caught up in situations, Jillian. They walk in, they see somebody being abused. You know what? Sometimes you just don't know
Guess
what to
what
do.
I would do? I'd pick up the phone and call the cops.
Okay.
If a man
again,
is on a boy...
Even in this situation, it's not like you walked in and there's a stranger abusing a boy. It's somebody you know really well.
Yeah.
You know,
the whole situation is despicable, and I'm just hoping. I'm so glad that they did talk about it, because now it is really bringing it into the forefront.
This guy went back. He and his brother were molested for years by this priest. He went back 40 years later, beat him up. I don't have a problem with him either.
Well, you have to, and I'll tell you why.
I don't.
Because
justice didn't work for him.
I understand that, but then you open up a can of worms for the Wild West for somebody to say, I was abused 50 years ago, and now he got off, and so now I'm going to go do it.
What about extenuating circumstances in this case?
Maybe there's got to be an exception in the law somewhere that said, you know...
Steve brought it up. He said the law gets in the way of justice.
It's true.
And it's so true. In this case, they say, oh, statute of limitations doesn't work. So basically, you're telling a child who is now a man, your voice does not matter.
That's why the books are important, because maybe back then, if he would have told early on, these books will never stop sex abuse. All they tell you is, if you're abused, tell somebody.
Feel comfortable to tell somebody.
But you have to tell the right person, because sometimes you tell people and
it's the abuser. Sometimes it's the person that's abusing you is the one you want to tell.
And also, and Jill, you know this, oftentimes the abuser is somebody who has groomed you and who's good to you and gives you time and attention.
Can I tell you, you tell somebody and they've been abused themselves, their mental capacity cannot handle what you're telling them, and they don't do anything about it.
That's why you don't just tell one. This book tells you, tell anybody, somebody that will listen.
Yeah.
Can we get you to learn to speak out?
I know, I'm very shy.
Right. Stacey Honowitz, thank you, Stacey.
Thanks so much for having me.
Stacey Beth, thank you.